Ralph Peters. He's a retired U.S. Army intelligence officer and the author of several books concerning U.S. strategic policy. Ralph, thanks for being with us today.
Hey, great to speak to you today.
I appreciate it very much. Well, what do you think about the news, Ralph? What do you think about the president's apparent decision to turn our back on our eastern friends and turn away from missile defense?
Well, in pressing the reset button with Russia, clearly President Obama is willing to press the delete key on Eastern Europe. I just think this is a tragedy. Now, I have great respect for Secretary Gates. He's in a tough position, and he chose his words carefully this morning. Every single thing Secretary Gates said was accurate in a military sense. What he didn't speak to was the strategic diplomatic disaster this is creating. Fred, to be honest, I never supported the missile defense system in Eastern Europe. I thought it was premature, wrong place, wrong time. I didn't underestimate the threat. I just didn't think that was the right way to go. Mm-hmm. But once we committed to it, the Czechs and the Poles, successive governments, put tremendous political capital into pleasing us. They've sent troops to Iraq. These people have done everything they can to cement an alliance with the United States because, especially the Poles, they're still terrified of Russia's imperial ambitions. And under Putin, they're certainly back.
70th anniversary today.
Absolutely.
The invasion.
And so what we're seeing here is the worst of both worlds. I mean, I didn't agree with the decision to deploy it, but once we decided to deploy it, Moscow made it into a test of wills. Putin was sure he could back us down, and it doesn't matter really how it's played in Washington because these missiles weren't a threat to Washington. The threat was to Eastern Europe, to our bases, but especially the big threat isn't Iranian missiles, it's Moscow's threat to Eastern Europe. Putin has imperial ambitions, and the Poles today and the Czechs, but especially the Poles, must be heartbroken and crestfallen, and the cheap Crimean champagne corks must be popping in the Kremlin. This is a huge win for Vladimir Putin, and we got nothing in return.
And this, of course, will undoubtedly have political consequences in those countries over there whose leaders depended upon us and our good faith. We're probably killing off some good friends over there politically because they look very foolish having sided with the United States. And we were just talking about it. It's going to have ramifications for a long time in a lot of different ways, some direct, some indirect, that we can't foresee right now. But getting back to Putin just a minute. Obviously, the president thinks that he can turn Putin around on his aid to Iran. Is that not what this is all about? And what do you think the chances of that are?
I think the chances of that are less than zero. But the consensus among my friends who are still inside the system was that after Obama's utterly failed visit to Moscow several months ago, when Putin just lectured him in a very condescending manner, the consensus was that, hey, Obama gets it now. Putin's not our friend. Well, apparently not, because we just gave Putin an enormous psychological and strategic win. I mean, I can't overstate the importance of this to Moscow. We betrayed our allies, and actually, I have to say, Fred, the bigger question for me now, even bigger than this particular case, is how many of our allies is President Obama willing to betray? He's written off Israel. He's written off Honduras. He's not really going to bat hard for Colombia. Around the world, I think America's allies are getting very, very nervous because we see the president lining up, for instance, in Honduras with Chavez and the Castros and Daniel Ortega of Nicaragua. And he's siding with the Palestinians, for God's sakes, in the Middle East. I mean, where does it end?
I'm going to touch real quickly. It looks like The Guardian is saying that Russia is hinting broadly that Obama's decision will not be met by any swift or generous concessions. The country's foreign ministry spokesman says it's a positive sign, but clearly said that Washington did this unilaterally. There's no deals with Moscow, they say, on Iran or any other issues. I mean, I'm sort of flabbergasted. I mean, you think that at least the least that Obama could have done has gotten something public out of him. They couldn't even get that.
No, I mean, this is just pathetic.
People need to understand how this stuff works. It's not just a matter of invasion, although it can come down to that, as people in Georgia know. But they have political divisions in countries like the Ukraine. And there's some of those satellite countries there that still have a strong pro-Russia bent, you know. Who do you think is going to look like they've got the clout now, you know, domestically, politically, inside those satellite countries?
They look back to Stalin. Those were the good old days. The romanticized rose-colored
the pro-U.S.
glasses.
factions are going to have a harder time of it.
Well, especially in Ukraine, which is already threatened. Now, the Poles, there's no serious pro-Russian faction in Poland, of course, because they've suffered too much. But they've got to be scared. Now, what do they do now? Do they look for an accommodation? Because this was clearly a complete cave-in to Moscow, and as you pointed out, with nothing in return.
He says here in his statement, you know, that we're going to have a bigger, better missile defense system.
Yeah, well, yeah, and we're going to, and health care isn't going to hurt the budget. It's all going to be free for everybody. Yeah, well, we understand that. Again, you know, I wasn't a supporter of this system, but once we committed to it, we needed to follow through. We can't do this to our allies. And this was basically, to me, a huge cave-in to the extreme left that's been anti-missile defense all along. Obama's trying to placate them because he's alienating them on other issues. And I'm bewildered that General Jones, the National Security Advisor, would go down this route. He's got to know better. He's got to understand the second, third, and fourth order effects of this. It's not just, you know, saving a couple bucks on a missile defense system. This is strategically disastrous.
Lieutenant Colonel Ralph Peters, author of The War After Armageddon. Thank you so much
My pleasure.
for being with us.